Good morning, everybody. First talk after the keynote, I guess, for droidcon London. So happy to be here. My name is John. I'm from the Microsoft Surface Duo Developer Experience Team. Recently rebranded as the Android Microsoft Platform Experience Team. So lots of fun words being thrown together there. But for those that aren't familiar with it, the Surface Duo is our two-screen device, similar to a Samsung Fold, but no fold, it's just two screens, that runs Android 12L now, as of Monday. So feel free to stop by our booth, play with it, check it out. We're happy to work with developers and help them do what we're going to talk about today, which is bring applications to large screen devices, specifically, obviously the Duo, but everything that we do works for Samsung Folds or tablets or any large screen device that you might have. So I'm going to specifically talk, I'm a Flutter developer, so I'm going to specifically be talking about Flutter during my talk, but everything I'm going to talk about applies to Compose, Jetpack Window Manager, Kotlin, all the SDKs and the controls that I'm going to talk about. We have identical matching ones for you for all those other frameworks as well. So, and they work identical. So everything I'm going to talk about applies across the board, but specifically the sample code and stuff that I might show is Flutter based. Before I start, I don't know, I didn't get a chance to sit in the keynote. I was down in our booth working with our folks, but definitely want to give a shout out and recognition that this is one of the first conferences that we've been able to come to and talk to people again. So this is the first talk I think I've given since I was in Paris in February of 2020, right before everything shut down. So that was the last time I talked anywhere. So it's fun to get back on the road and be out talking to people again. So happy to be here and glad droidcon invited us to present and sponsor. So today, everybody in this room probably has an app in the App Store, right, or in the Play Store. And I bet if I ask, has anybody done anything to make their app large screen aware? A couple folks have done a few things. Okay, great. So definitely stop by the booth, try it out on the dual screen, see what might be different than you may have seen already. But you'll notice kind of a theme here our marketing team put together for us about exercising. So we'll be following this theme about kind of the gym and trying something new, and we're going to show you how, with some simple exercises and enhancements, you can tackle things, particularly low-hanging fruit within your app, to make them large screen, multi-screen aware. And then as you become stronger and more fit in your workout routine, then we'll go ahead and run through some more advanced topics. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the testing things, not a whole lot, but really getting into those controls and the SDKs that we've built and enhancements we've made to the different Google frameworks. We're going to talk about some samples that we have out there. We'll dig into a little bit of code and the tools that you can use on your journey. But as I mentioned, definitely stop by our booth. We've got some folks there that can help out, and our team is open to working with anybody building apps that's interested in bringing those to large screen devices. We're definitely interested in getting in contact with you and helping you work through that. So let's go ahead and dig in. There we go. So you see a few apps here on the screen. They're all Microsoft apps, if you didn't notice that. The reason we're showing Microsoft apps is a lot of people don't realize that Microsoft has an extremely large Android developer population. We have over 80 applications in the Google Play Store. I think we're actually closer to 100 at this point. But we just want to show some of the apps that we've taken and enhanced for large screen and dual screen devices. So what you're seeing here is on the right-hand side, you're seeing two Office applications. In this case, it's Word and Excel. And what is happening here is we're taking the chart from the right-hand side and dragging it across to the left-hand side. And now this could be on a device like this dual screen Duo. In this case, it's a large screen tablet. So you're using Android 12L, running two apps side by side, having one app, being aware that it wants to be a drag source, and the other one being a drop target, being able to do that. On the left, you're looking at something like the Samsung Fold. Similar design, similar to the layout of the tablet, just a smaller screen. But again, being able to run two apps side by side, drag and drop information from one app over to the other, and consume it within the other application. And in the middle is the more unique Surface Duo, which is two separate screens that function as one. So in this case, what you're seeing is Outlook. Who doesn't get up in the morning, pour a cup of coffee, sit at the table, and go through their email, right? So today, a typical device, single screen device, you're going to have one screen. You're going to click on an email. It's going to open. You're going to read it, click back, click on another email. It's going to open. So it's a little tedious on a single screen device. On a dual screen or even on a large screen device, the app would work identical. We split the content. So on the left-hand side, you see your list of emails. You click on one, it shows the details. On the right, you just click through. There's no back and forth. If you had calendar open, calendar would be the same way. You'd have your calendar on the left. When you click on an event, the event details would be on the right. And you can quickly go through your calendar for the day that way. So really just kind of enhancing productivity. Microsoft is all about productivity for the most part. And that's, what we're trying to do with a lot of our apps is update them for large screen, dual screen devices to make them more productive and make you more productive in your day and the users. So those are some of the examples that we're going to talk a little bit about how to do that in the rest of the talk today. So the first step on this journey is really, simply testing your app. So whether that's on a tablet or on an actual dual screen device or using an emulator is the first step you want to take. Not everyone has the budget, obviously, to buy all the different devices that are out there. So there are other ways to test. Obviously, people test all the time on emulators. We've actually created a Surface Duo emulator that you can download that emulates the Surface Duo, being able to test just like you would in a normal Android emulator, but with the two screens, so you can see how that looks there if you don't have access to a device. You'll want to make sure the app looks good when you have that extended canvas, so that large screen device. So things that you don't want to do are lock your app to a specific orientation or an aspect ratio. Right, so in this case, we see this particular application, when you rotate it, rotates nice. Would that look great on a large screen? Maybe not, but at least it's supporting both ways. It's laying out the app differently, so that's a good first step that you can do. The next step would be testing it on those emulators in a side-by-side or in a dual screen scenario. So being able to run your app on a 12L emulator with another app running next to it. What does it look like when it's single by itself? What does it look like when it's side by side? What does it look like in each orientation? So the real easy, like we said, low-hanging fruit things that you can take advantage of and take a look at. Another thing to consider is the devices like the Samsung Folds have an internal and an external display, different size displays, different density, and all that. So testing on those also to make sure that your app looks good if it's on the front screen versus the inside screen, and what happens to your app when it switches between them, if a user does that. So all kind of that initial low-hanging fruit to you to take a look at and try and help enhance your app for. I mentioned productivity before, so the next step in that easy to accomplish stuff is that productivity standpoint. So does your app support drag and drop? Should it support drag and drop? Think through, does your app have something that other apps might want to consume? And then being able to support the user dragging that into another app. A single screen device, it's not anything we usually have to worry about. Usually that means we support copy and paste, and that's about it. But with being able to run apps side by side now on large screen devices, you want to be able to allow users to do that. So if it's source that you want to be able to give other apps information, great. If it's a target, maybe think about other apps that can provide information to you. So being able to support the drag target in your app, or drop destination, I guess is what we call it. Large screens also work great with other input devices, so pens and keyboards. So this device happens to have a pen capability. The Samsung devices have pen. They all obviously support Bluetooth. So being able to support pen and keyboard input as well is something to think about as we get into bigger devices now. Accessibility and things like that are all things that are easy to take care of within an app if you just take a little bit of time to think through it. And to help you out, we have a lot of great documentation. You'll notice at the bottom of the slides, we have a lot of links pointing to different documentation to help you get started with information, samples, and even a design kit that we'll talk about in a little bit. So after we've kind of tackled that initial low-hanging fruit, those basic things that we can do to extend to large screen devices, those kind of fall into the first design pattern, the extended canvas, so something that's running on a big screen. So now let's talk about some even getting that app to be even more flexible, and talk about some of these other design patterns that you see. Something like the list detail is pretty obvious. There's a lot of apps that support list detail today. You think about email apps or chat apps, all fall into the list detail and work well for that design pattern. 2-page is a pattern that works great for reading experiences. So we have apps like Kindle has been redesigned for the large screen and for the dual screen, and support that 2-page view where you're just kind of swiping through your reading and it looks just like you're reading a book. Then we have companion pane. This in particular is great for something like a game. It's also really good for editing pictures. We use it for our camera app on the Surface Duo. So on one side of the screen, you have your camera that you would normally have on your device where you're taking a picture. On the other side, we show you the preview of the picture you just took, so you can quickly delete it or do things with it. If you decide to edit, it takes you into the editing app where you have the image on one side and your controls on the other, kind of like this image on here displays. So some apps lend themselves to this particular design pattern. I mentioned games is another one where you could rotate the device, potentially have your game on the top and control panels and stuff on the bottom. So there's a lot of opportunity there. Dual view is an interesting one. We don't see a lot of these, but it's kind of like, as it shows there, it'd be something like a CAD application maybe, is the kind of simple way to think about it, where you'd have maybe a 2D visual on one side and then the 3D on the other. We use it a lot for maps is another one that kind of falls into this dual view, where you have a map on one side but maybe a zoomed in map on the other, or things like that. So there's a couple different things you can do with that design pattern. We have a link to our design kit. So our design team went through, they did this research initially on what are the different patterns for a dual screen device before we started thinking about large screen, and realized that, well, they're the same. It's really not any different. And they put together this design kit. So it has wireframes, it's got how-tos and all kinds of things in there that designers can use to put together a design using our kit for these large screen devices. So definitely check that out if you have time. So the obvious next step is thinking, well, what's the right pattern for my app? And, while many apps might fit into just one particular design pattern, like I mentioned, things like Outlook or a chat app might fit into a specific pattern. Some apps are going to take more patterns. This particular app that you're seeing here is our sample app that we've written to showcase the different SDKs and things that can be done on a large screen device to make them more productive and more user-friendly. This app actually falls into all the categories. So you see that we have the extended canvas on the one side, where we have a map taking up the whole screen. But then we also have the 2-page view where we're showing information on both pages as you swipe through the catalog of the application. It's list detail is in there as well. We have a list. It's a shopping application for a fictitious guitar shop that lets you go through, find a shop, go through their list of guitars, pick a guitar, customize it, look for a shop on the map, all that sort of thing. So in the list detail, you actually have a list of guitars. If you're on a dual screen or a large screen device, you can click on a guitar. It will open on the right-hand side a customization page with information about the app. So all that. And then from a development standpoint, it's interesting because one of the things that we've done with this app is on any one of these pages, there's a show me the code button. So you can see the little bit of code that was done to make the app multi-screen or large screen aware. So very simple to go through and get a quick example of how to do these things and then port that into your applications. This particular application today is it's written in, I believe it's a Jetpack Window Manager Compose example, but we're working on bringing that sample over into all the other frameworks as well. So things like Flutter, native Kotlin, Java, and all those fun things that are out there. So getting into some of the tools that you can use that are built into the framework. So this is more specific to Flutter, but same concepts exist in the other frameworks. So if you're building a Flutter application, you have a couple of ways to think about how do you lay out your screen. Where do you put your widgets on the screen? So the first option is Layout Builder. Layout Builder is going to give you what's called a box constraints object. That box constraints is going to give you information about the screen that the object is on, and in particular, that exact widget. So that's where it differs a little bit from Media Query. So if in a widget I use the builder, layout builder, I can find out not only am I in a specific orientation by looking at my width and my height, but also I can find out about other stuff that's on the screen and where things are, and use that to determine how I want to lay out. So the typical scenario would be something like if my maximum width is bigger than the breakpoint I've set, right? So typically when you're laying out a screen, you're going to set breakpoints for sizes. 500 pixels might be your minimum for a single screen display phone type device. Anything above 500 up to 800 might be a smaller tablet, and anything above that, a large tablet. So you might choose 3 or 4 breakpoints as your spots that you're going to check for to decide how you lay out your screen. So you'll use that. You might use that breakpoint. You might use the information coming from Layout Builder and say, well, if the maximum width is bigger than my breakpoint, then I know I have enough space, so I'm going to lay it out in a row of controls with my list, my details, and set my proportions and sizing appropriately. Whereas if it's taller than, I might decide that I'm going to lay out differently, or I might change where my menu is. So we'll see on a sample here in a minute where we use a navigation rail instead of using the bottom navigation when we're in a big screen to make it more user-friendly and lay out better. So that's using Layout Builder, using that. You could also then attack it by using something like Media Query. The difference in Media Query in Flutter versus Layout Builder is Media Query gives you the entire size, not just the size of that widget. So if you have a full screen app and you're looking for the size based on Media Query, you're going to get the full size of the screen. Layout Builder is just going to give you the size that widget's taking up. So if it's a widget inside of a bunch of other widgets, it's smaller space. So there's a little nuance there when you're using them, and you might use both to lay it out. And we're going to get to a much easier way to do all this in a minute. But this is the way that you would normally attack it from the beginning. So then once you've done all that, you can then use some of these other tools that are available to you, some of these built-in controls, widgets in the case of Flutter, aspect ratio to size things based on the aspect. You could use things like a fixed box or fitted box to specifically size something when you want it to always be a certain size. So different tools available to you to give yourself a much better layout of your application. So I mentioned other things that we have available to you. So from a Flutter perspective, our team has put a lot of work back into Flutter. So we've contributed a bunch of code back to Google to bring this display features capability into Media Query. So what are display features? Well, it's a innumerable list of the display features on a device. And what we call a display feature are things like the hinge, in the case of the Duo. So in here you've got a hinge in the middle of the two screens that obscures whatever content is behind it. In the case of a fold, that would also be considered a display feature. And then of course cutouts, which everybody's used and seen today on all devices. Those are the 3 types that you might get back in the list of display features. We also give you the bounds of that display feature. So normally in a cutout, nobody worries about that. In Flutter, you have things like safe area to avoid that for you. But we don't have any way of avoiding the hinge or the fold in Flutter and in other frameworks. So by using the type to see what type of cutout it is and using the bounds, you can tell where it is. So we can do some things like make sure that we don't put content where the fold or the hinge is for a better user experience. We also have a state that we expose in these display features. So we have flat when it's completely opened. And then we have half opened, which would be if you've opened it this way or even on a Duo, folded it back over itself. So you can use that then to determine how you might want to lay out. I might want to lay things out differently if I know that the user has, gone from a flat state to a folded state. And we see that in some really good apps today that take advantage of that. YouTube does a really good job at that on a Z Flip. If you have a Z Flip device, you've probably seen, if you use YouTube, it normally would be in a state like this. You'd have a video on the top, and then below that you get all your kind of recommended. So what YouTube does is when you fold it a little bit, they notice that and they put the video only on the top and then make sure that everything else appears below the fold, even though it's a single screen, just to make it a lot better experience for the user. So just simple things like that you can do to take advantage of the information you're given and make your app more dual screen, big screen, large screen aware. You may have caught that I mentioned that it's a innumerable list of display features. And that's because a device might have more than one display feature. In particular, the Samsung devices do. So the folds have obviously a fold and a cutout. And in the future, there may be other devices that have 2 or even 3 potentially or more cutouts. So basically what we've decided to do with Google was make it a list rather than just a single entry that you would get back. Some of the other stuff that we've done back into the frameworks, again, specifically about Flutter, but the same information and the same capabilities have been contributed back to Jetpack Compose and Kotlin and all the different ones that are available to you. We've done things like take advantage of knowing this information, popping up dialogues in the right spot, so you don't have to worry about that. In the past, what would have happened is, we don't show it on this one, but before our enhancements, this dialog would have appeared right in the middle. So it would have been obscured by that fold and the hinge. On a fold, not so bad. On a hinge device like the Duo, a little bit harder for the user because they can't read the whole thing. So what we've done is we've put a lot of work into the framework to look at, are you running on a 2-screen device versus a single screen device, or even a large screen device that you're running in split mode? Because before, their pop-up would have still appeared in the middle even if you were running split mode. So now if you just use your typical show dialog type box, it's going to pop up on the correct side of the screen. We do give you some capabilities to change that if you want, though. So if you have a device or an app where you want, when it's running large screen, to show up where they clicked, for instance, there's a way to do that. You can give it an anchor point, and the framework just uses that point to decide which screen it should show on, if it's a multi-screen device, or which half of the screen, that sort of thing. We've done the same thing for pop-up menus, so drop-down boxes and pop-up menus. You see the red box kind of showing you where it would have been, and then you see that it's actually displaying on the correct side there. With the enhancements that we've made. Again, all of this you get for free, hence the batteries included. No work for you. If you just use the framework capabilities, you get all that out of the box. So that's a lot of work though, right, to lay out. And you can, I'm sure everybody's already thinking about, well, I might know that I'm on 2 screens. I might be able to tell the size. But now I got to worry about where I'm showing things. So I got to figure out, how do I make something show on the left and the right, and how do I know if it's a large screen versus a foldable versus a dual screen. So what we did is we went back and we created a bunch of helpful libraries and SDKs that you can download. In the case of Flutter, we have what's called the dual screen package. We have the same concept in whether you're doing apps in Xamarin or you're doing them in Jetpack Windows Manager or Compose or Kotlin or whatever. They all have an existing SDK that all have the same control in it. And what the control allows you to do is all that stuff that we just talked about doing with Layout Builder and Media Query, it does for you. So all you have to do is, to get what you see here on the bottom, is a very simple control in Flutter or in any of those frameworks. You add this 2-pane widget to a Flutter app or a 2-pane control in the other applications, and you give it a few things for it to know how to lay out. So you give it what's called a start pane and an end pane. So in Flutter, those are 2 separate widgets. They would be different views in some of the other languages or frameworks. And then you can give it a couple of helper information. So you can give it a proportion, and you can give it a priority. So the priority just says if I'm on a single screen device, then whatever I'm telling you is my priority is the view that you should display. If I'm on a dual screen device, then show both. If I'm on a large screen device, then proportion comes into play here. So you can say, in this case, we're saying 30%. So that just means if I'm on a large screen, single screen device, it's the Italian in me, I talk with my hands. If you're on a large screen device and you're laying things out like that, then the proportion comes into play, because what it'll do is say, okay, whatever I've set as my start pane, I'm going to give that 30% of my screen, and then the rest of the screen is going to be devoted to my end pane. And we used to call them pane 1, pane 2. We went back and forth with Google, and they said, no, we can't do that, because what happens when you rotate the device? It's not really a start and an end, it's a top and a bottom, or a 1 and a 2. So we came up with start and end, because I guess it makes sense either direction. But so very simply here now, I've laid out an application that will now work on this device. It'll work on a Samsung Fold. It'll work on a large screen tablet. And I'll get a nice view similar to, if I go back a click, similar to what you see here. So that layout gives you these 3 different support capabilities, whether I'm on a tablet, a dual screen device, or even a single screen device that I've rotated, or a dual screen device in that matter that I've rotated, without any real work for me as a developer. I didn't have to go back and rewrite any of my pages or my views or my widgets. All I had to do is tell it, if I'm on 2 screens, here are my 2 widgets, here's how I want them laid out. Now, it's a little deceiving because there is a little bit of work that you have to do. You'll have to do some things probably around state management, because in the past you may not have worried about it. You may have just said, hey, when I click this button, navigate to the next screen and here's some information for it. If you're more advanced, you maybe did have some state going and then you're already ahead of the game. But very little code from a development standpoint to really take advantage of these large screen devices and get up to speed there. So quickly, some samples. This is the reader sample. So this would be great for any sort of a book or a documentation. Very simple to implement with that 2 screen, or even 1 screen in this case, is what it was used. You can see some of the sample at the link there. I won't spend a lot of time on it. But how do we, you may say, well, okay, well, this is great, but one of the things would be, with layout is taking advantage of 2 screens. How do I worry about the hinge? So if you use the 2 screen layout, the dual screen package, the 2 pane view in your app, you would get this for you. But in this case, this particular app, they did it as 1 page, and all they did was use media query and some of the information that you get to determine if there's a hinge or not, and then base it on that. So what they're doing here is they've determined on the left one, there's a hinge. We're going to add some padding between the pieces of content to make it lay out better and avoid that hinge when we're going across the app. On a smaller device like the Fold, there's a thin orange line there you might be able to see. So they're just making it smaller. They're still giving a little bit of padding, but obviously there's nothing obscuring it, so they don't have to worry about it. On a large screen like a tablet, there's really nothing to worry about at all, so there's no extra padding being taken into account. So very straightforward in the code. Assuming someplace above we set a generic padding that we're going to use. All we're doing here is using media query to say, do we have a hinge or not? If we have a hinge, we're on a dual screen device. And then we're using that. So if we're on a dual screen device, then we're going to take into account, are we vertical or horizontal? So as the user rotated the device or not, because that means our hinge is facing this way or it's facing this way. So based on that, we either set a width of the hinge as our padding, or we set the height of the hinge as our padding. And then if we're not on any of those, then we basically just check the size of the screen and say, well, how big is our screen? If it's more than 1,000, then we're going to say we don't need any padding. Just whatever we have as our default is good. So very straightforward, easy way to enhance the application. Second sample is kind of your typical list detail sort of pattern. On the left-hand side, what we're looking at is a list of pictures. And then when you click on it, you're seeing a couple of things here. They dragged the picture over to the other app, but in a second, it's going to expand. and it's going to now lay it out for 2 screens or a large screen. So I mentioned before, one of the things you noticed here that was done to make this large screen aware and layout better is the menu changed from a bottom navigation when it was taking up half the screen to a nav rail when it's dual or on a large screen device. The other thing it's doing is when you click on an item in the list, rather than opening it on a new page in a new view, it's actually putting the views side by side. So when it opens, it'll actually show it on the right-hand side when it gets through that. So the next type of enhancement that you can do there with the 2-pane, this actually uses the 2-pane control. This third sample is not in Flutter. This is one that we're working to enhance and bring to Flutter and as a Flutter example, but this is in Jetpack Compose, Jetpack Window Manager and Compose. What this does is, as I said, it's a fictitious guitar store. I'll let you locate a store, let you browse through their products, customize a particular guitar, all that sort of thing. This app is available in the Play Store, so you can download it, play with it today on your devices and see how it works. There's a view the code button, but it's using all of the different design patterns that we talked about. So it uses list detail in some places, it uses the extended canvas in some places, it uses the other ones that I can't think of off the top of my head right now in some places, but it really gives you a good example of an app that is taking care and using all the different patterns to provide a great user experience on, in this case, you're seeing it on a dual screen device, but the app works great on a Samsung Fold or a tablet and looks exactly the same as it does here with no changes to the code. So same code running on all the devices, no extra enhancements and stuff. Again, if you want to learn more about any of this stuff, the link will take you to the app, but all of this is on our GitHub page, all the sample code. You can download all of it and play with it and see how we're doing all of that there. So digging into it just a little bit of how does this look in Jetpack Window Manager. So really what Jetpack Window Manager does is give you that same information that we were talking about for Flutter. You have access to the window metrics or the window size. You can really use that to help you update layouts based on your window size, based on where things are and how you want them laid out. You can also access the display feature information like we had inside Flutter. We also have that exposed now in Jetpack Window Manager. And really that's what we're going to focus on here in this particular code. What you're seeing is the recommended way of doing this. So in your activity, you're going to use lifecycle aware coroutines to collect your data in the form of this window layout object, which I think will highlight if I click. Yeah. And so what you're going to do here is collect that data in the window layout info flow, and inside that use a call here to then parse it. And inside that, you'll see what we're doing is we're using those same display features we talked about in Flutter. We're basically checking, getting the first feature, and we want to know if that's a fold. So in this case, we're just trying to find out, are we on a fold device or not? And if we are, then we're going to go ahead and do something based on knowing that we have a fold. So it might be changing our padding. It might be laying out differently so that we avoid that fold or something along those lines. So same stuff that we were doing before in here. And again, the 2-pane controls that we have available do all this for you if you use those. The same, a little bit different, we have this new is separating in the window manager that we didn't have in the Flutter control, but it gives you the same information. You have flat or half open, you have horizontal or vertical, and full or none based on the occlusion. But a lot of this is all there, and what you see is, if we click through, where is it? Is separating just gives us that. This is the one I was getting to. So is separating is really the way on in a composed Jetpack Window Manager environment. Use is separating because it's going to support both types of devices, whether it's large screen or dual screen. You're going to get information when it's spanned, it's true on a dual screen device, and true when it's half opened on a large screen foldable device. And then you're also going to get false on the large screen when it's flat, and false when it's not spanned, so when it's running on one side versus the other. All right, and then let's get to some testing. So we mentioned at the beginning, one of the first things that you want to do is test your app as it sits today. Well, then you want to be able to test all the changes that you're making as you go along. So once you've gotten to that point, there's a couple of ways you can do it. Obviously on a device if you have one, but not everybody can have all the different devices to test on. So there's some investment that we've made, as I mentioned, in this dual screen emulator on the right. So you can download our Surface Duo emulators. They run on the Android stack, the emulator stack, and gives you all the capabilities that you have in this device. So you can simulate opening it all the way around. You get the angle that it's at, no matter where it's at. You can simulate, obviously, rotation, and all the different accelerometers and things that are in it are supported in that emulator. So a great way to test your app there. The other way is obviously using the built-in emulators that Android has available as well. And then what about, how can I do something where I can simulate different sizes on one place? Well, here you're seeing two options. The option on the left is what's called the Windows subsystem for Android. So if you have a Windows device that you're building on, you can install the Windows subsystem for Android. You can install any Android app from the Amazon Play Store, App Store, whatever, I forget what Amazon calls it, the Amazon App Store, I think. But if your app is out in that store, you can download it, run it on Windows using the Windows subsystem for Android, and that gives you the ability then to kind of drag and drop or drag the window to different sizes and see how your app performs there. Your other option is the new, I think it's still in beta, but the new resizable emulator that Android comes with in the Android Studio. So that's what you're seeing here on the right is the new resizable, which gives you the option to say, I want a phone, I want a tablet, I want other screen device, and you can do the same sort of thing and resize. So those are two ways that you can test your application to confirm that things that you're doing there are working. So I use the one on the right for the most part, the Android emulator with the Surface Duo emulator to check on the two-screen device, and those two get me through all of the things that I need. I think we're almost at time. Yep. So in conclusion, here we've kind of gone through all these. We did our little warm up. We talked about some of the things that you can do to get started on tackling that low hanging fruit. We talked about some of the things that you can use, tools and framework things, and then we've moved into a little bit of testing and going through some of that more advanced stuff on how you can bring your apps over. So with that, a list of resources that you can grab off of my slides later, or if you take a quick picture. And then, as I mentioned before, feel free to stop by the booth. We got a team out there that can help you today, tomorrow. We're definitely interested in getting in contact with you after the show if you want to bring your apps to large screens and are looking for some help there. We have a group of folks all over the world that are interested in helping bring more apps to be large screen foldable aware. And you can follow us on Twitter, read all our stuff on GitHub. We do a Twitch stream every Friday. All of it's under the Surface Duo Dev tag, so on YouTube or Twitch or wherever. So hopefully we can see a bunch more apps out there that are supporting large screen devices and help a few get there. So, all right, thanks.